Okay, folks, let's go ahead and get going here. We're up on 11:25 here. So this next piece of the presentation is focused on the model that we're suggesting to you all for consideration, and are wide open to your feedback on it. And we'll give you our reasons as to why we're suggesting this particular model. The other piece on this is that we're transitioning from now, this morning's session was really on information, here's the backdrop, to now we've refined it a little to say now based on that information and the research we've done, here's the suggested model that we want to move forward with, or we're suggesting that we move forward with. The other piece that we've done with this, as you see the pictures here, and one of the things that Alvin's again helping us with is now how do you begin to define lineage in our own terms and in our own words, and using our own language. What does it mean? So that's why Alvin will help us through this piece of it. But on your right, you see the images of the objects there. We also thought that this was a why we think this is an important piece of our history. So these all belong to Laguna, the collection that's out there. And these belong to the people. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to meet with many of our Kiva leaders. Many of them are gone now with Otsisha, Uncle Jimmy Daya, Dennis Smith, George Cicero, George Mariano, and their helpers around a discussion on these items and what opportunities were being presented to us from some of the other pueblos to help us. But long story short, what they said is, these belong to the people. These aren't the Kiva side, this belongs to the people. So that's why we thought this was a good example of how we've connected for years and years and years. Even though we don't use these, I don't think anybody in this room has seen us use these here in our pueblo recently, or really probably in our lifetimes. The last time was, like I said, late 1800s. But it's still a connection, right? It's a different way of identifying and determining lineage, right, and belonging. So as we go through this, you'll see how we're using this. So I'll put it
Okay, not right there, right? Jewish that's Jewish work in Anya minutes Ladia, which is on a toy station, it's on a street down. Bayuhama, eat you to Ladia toy station, true, it's on a street down. There's a set on Dara White, Anya, you work in minutes Ladia, which toy station, Sana well, here, you are yet at the see, go, Mexica. You Sana, it's on a white drill. It's at the school. The whole week, yes. See, that's you. To regain Home Depot told very lovely, isn't it? So we got you, that's there. I'm here, it's on the floor. Here's no, it's easy. You go, you say it's it. Okay, it's on the shift. Yeah, there it is. I'm almost there, but I like it. Oh, I can say what you go to the next time. It's on the right. Yeah. 是吧？你看嘛，我写出，就是他们被留言的这个，大概这就是我们是业者，都在不买上的这个，在就是这个，比如说高速的话，就是我们刚干起来这个，我也感到我职业者，在就是而且就是当然是就是干，这个，这个叫。Spinna, I think like you want it's like we have an idea, like I have it's like it's a way based on the argument to go. Una, yeah, you make sure you make you go. I say they do break you.
That was lying. So in my head, that's shown here. Ham was large. It's a not made the man more steep here. It's a straight way. It's as in I do preach to a true one in my head. Me how much she was true. Then it's a whole young to one she made a dish to you hum to I tell it to. Sana shoes to down. Kokoma, they all three so. Why have to eat that you should you? It's why 10 minutes or so after the meal. And hang out, go up and we hum, say true. Yeah, they make a judge and feel that up by cars and take away the face. Take away you what's a good.
And as we go forward, the intention is that I hope what it triggers in all of us, and in particular to our young people, to also think about how else are we represented. You know, how else are we seen? You know, as Laguna, where else are we? You know, as Laguna people. So similar to the first phase, the second phase, a little bit different. In this go round, we're actually here to seek input from you on the belonging model. Seek input on possible other models. Again, this is the model we're recommending, but maybe in your travels and your learning, your own education, you have some other suggestions, and we're wide open to that. Like I said, it's not going to hurt our feelings if you have other ideas. That's the purpose of this meeting. Provide community feedback on data to council. So once we hear back from you, we're looking to be scheduled at the end of April. We have one more session next week with similar to this with the larger community, or whoever wants to come, or you want to come back. So we'll compile all that data, including what we've gotten from the Barstow folks, present that back to council. What we're not here to do is to determine the policy or the outcome. We're not here to tell you how, what's going to, what the final solution is. That's above our pay grade. We're not assigned to determine which model will ultimately be used. And we're not here to determine membership. So we're here to get your information so that we can help inform those kind of decisions for the council. So this piece of the presentation, these are the 3 main objectives. We'll share the findings from the Who Belongs Conference, the survey. We shared this presentation with council. As you're aware, before any of our commissions or committees go out into the public, we normally run it by council first. And so we have Marty Kawimi here and Sean Ray, who are both council members, who have also heard this presentation as well. So that the council was very supportive and engaged in this conversation. Objective 2, to present the lineage model and our reasons for it. And then objective 3, to seek your feedback. So that's really what's going to drive the rest of this presentation. So making the connection here, one of the things we want you to be thinking about is we've always been defined by someone else. When you look at 25 CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, you look at ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act, you look at HUD and the HASDA, you look at all these different federal laws, they have a definition for an Indian. And it's not our definition. This is our opportunity to define for ourselves who we are. Using the concepts like lineage, but really about belonging. And so what we hope as we go through this, you will help us in that definition as we give it back to the council. So as we pointed out, here's history. This is a picture of Laguna during this is about 1888, if I remember the date correctly. That's in Hawaii. Oops. In the village at Laguna, you can see way back there is way back here. And so this is how it looked. But you see the ladies with the English utilizing them during this time period. And the reason why we wanted to make this particular connection is that we already have ways of connecting, of identifying. How we define it is really up to us. We've taken everyone else's definition and it's pretty much minimized us as a people. So we hope that these systems that already exist, that we would consider as a community re-engage in them. The challenge that we've run across over the years is that that connection's been broken, it's been fractured. And that fracture has happened, maybe it's our own fault, our own policies. It could be the federal government. There's probably enough blame to go around as to why this happened. We just finished having a really great conversation about language. There's a lot of factors that can cause language to be lost. But there's also a lot of factors that could cause language to continue to be strong. And where have we weakened those or strengthened those? So we hope that as we go through this conversation, that we begin to see that we already have systems to define how we belong. This next slide talks to, and Pauline and others mentioned, the importance of the clan system. This is a graphic that I took from the Zuni Emergence project. They had, a number of years ago, Zuni Pueblo was involved in a land rights litigation in the state of Arizona as it related to the Grand Canyon. The state of Arizona came back and told Zuni Pueblo, you're in New Mexico, you don't have a dog in this fight, why are you wanting to be a part of this litigation? What they said is some of our traditional land bases there, as part of the Grand Canyon, our place of emergence is Shapa. For them, their place of emergence is at a location there in the Grand Canyon. So what that caused them to do is that they told their creation, emergence, migration story, but they also engaged some of their artists. So they actually drew significant places or parts of their creation story, their migration. And this is one of them, where they talked about the naming of the clans and how we belong. To me, this is that ultimate model of lineage. As Pauline and others mentioned, Elsie, those teachings that, don't marry relatives, don't marry your clan, all those kind of things. Like our traditional marriages, though, we've probably devalued the system. So this becomes a really important way of defining how we belong as Laguna people. Also keeping in mind some of these clans, are I guess, what would you say, immigrants to Laguna. So when you think about some of the clans like Roadrunner, there's a lot of significance or a lot of information how those clans come from Zuni. Corn, there's different variations of corn clan. The Parrot clan, there's history or information that talks about them coming to Parrot and Turquoise, coming from Zia and Santa Ana. So there's immigration, if you will, of those clans. But those relations demonstrated also how we belong. The relations. So, just like as an example, like my grandfather, Zuni, his clan is a Sandhill Crane. That was his clan. We don't have those here, that clan. But in Zuni, there's a large number of Sandhill Crane clan. I don't know what this one is right here. Maybe they saw the future and maybe that's the Canada's. But this is one of the things we wanted to demonstrate, that we already have systems in place that demonstrate how we belong. This next slide, we want to share with you a little feedback from the Who Belongs conference. Again, some of you have filled out those surveys, and these were the responses that were provided. We had probably over 100 surveys, actually over 300 surveys. And Pauline also hit on a really key point in that a lot of these meetings, it's difficult to get people to come out. For that particular session, we had on both days upwards of 350 people physically in attendance, but we had over 1,000 on the YouTube watching. So we had a really, really good turnout. And so on this, one of the ones that I really want to bring emphasis to is that last bullet. We as people are like trees. We all have roots that expand deep into the earth, our mother. We have branches, leaves that will grow and come and go with the seasons and generations. We must be as strong as a tree, but keep in mind that a tree is only as strong and healthy as its roots. I thought that was really thoughtful from whoever, I don't know who wrote this, but this was in one of the surveys. I thought it was really, really thoughtful and deep. Because it says nothing about blood, but it says everything about connecting. And this is what's important. Yes?
A lot of our kids don't even know what chamu is. Yesterday, Arlena took us some chamu to eat, and the wild onion, that was I guess their hobby to do that long time ago. Go look for chamu in March. And they taste good. It's Ryan too. Put it in your school. And they use the clothes supposed to like
So she just, for those of you that may not have heard her, she shared that some of this information is important because things like chamu, the wild onions, some of our young people don't know about those things, and I think that's important because it ties back to that community teaching. Right? What is it that we've been taught? What's been gifted to us already that's in the earth? So, but it ties back to the larger as community members. What are our roots? And what's our connection to this community? That's really, really important. That third bullet is also, I think, very critical, that this Laguna is what you are born into. We don't get to choose that. I think that's really important. It kind of goes back to the earlier conversation of our children. We don't get to choose who they be with. Right? Our job is to love any child that comes from that. That's our job, without question. Because it's not that child's choice either. So that's where I think these pieces become very critical in how we begin to define not only who belongs, but how do we belong. Anything on this side? So this is another group of responses that we got from the survey. And I think that first one is a really strong one as well. To honor our past, we must control our future. Right now, with blood quantum, we don't control our future, other than to allow for the potential or eventual termination. And the irony about blood quantum is that it's not a federal law, it's not required. But we've protected something that's gonna do away with us in our Constitution. So it's a very odd situation that we find ourselves in this current day and age. That third one, without blood quantum, we have no limits. I think it's really important to think about this deeply. And one of the things that I would share how I think about this, you hear a lot of the times people say we live in two worlds, right? We live in the white world and we live in the red world. To me, I don't think about it in terms of color. I think about it in terms of there's a physical world and there's a metaphysical world. Physical is this. Metaphysical is this. Our spiritual existence. We pray, we go to church, we go to the heat, however it is. We exist that way. So I think those are critical ways to think about how it is we belong, because we don't belong only to each other or to a piece of paper because you meet the blood quantum. We belong to the Creator. So it's a much deeper connection as well. So from the surveys, these are all the surveys that we got back. Like I said, there's over 300 surveys here, and they're filled in front and back. So that was pretty cool that people took the time to do that. But from the surveys, 95% of the folks responded with the desire to move away from blood quantum. That's pretty significant. 4% wanted more information. 1% did not answer yes or no. But what's interesting is that, like the 4 and the 1%, if they didn't answer yes or no, in their notes, it's very clear that they're not interested in continuing the blood quantum. So maybe they didn't understand the question or what, I don't know. But it's very clear that they want an alternative to blood quantum. So, like I said, there's 4% that wanted a little bit more information. So now, this next slide, this was a really good conversation when we were in Barstow, because one of the questions that came out is, so what other models are out there? What are other people doing? And so there's a ton of approaches, some of them very, very much the same, just maybe little nuances here and there. But here are some of just the I guess, more common ones that we've seen. Blood quantum, right now, we have a 1/4 requirement, Laguna blood. It's beginning to flatline again. Every quarter, we have the enrollment committee come into council and they present the new applications for membership. Majority of those are in the 1/4 range. A few years ago, and it was kind of a sad trend to see, a few years ago, during the enrollment presentations, we were beginning to see a trend where fewer and fewer fathers were establishing paternity, or were not establishing paternity. Why that was happening, I don't know, but we began to see that downward trend. And those are a couple dangerous signals. First one is, why aren't fathers cleaning their children? Secondly, if we're on a blood quantum system, it impacts their quantity of blood, because they can't claim the father's blood. So it creates those types of dynamics. So I've not paid attention recently as to if that trend has changed. But during my term as governor, that's one of the things we were seeing, that particular trend. The lineage descendancy model. So when you look at the definition of lineage and descendant, we've been saying descendancy, we're kind of laughing at ourselves, saying how we must sound pretty educated because descendancy is not even a word. So you can see in the misspelled, the red underlined, it's descendant or descendants. So descendancy is not a word, as we recently found out. But really the lineal descent, you're coming from your ancestors, you're from a family, a particular family. You can trace your family roots, maybe specific to membership. You have relatives that have been on the rolls or whatever the case may be. So that's how we're looking at defining descendancy. One of the things that Ed, I'm going to have him touch on here in a little bit, is we also looked at, in that line of benefits, what would, if we moved away from blood quantum and went to lineage, what would that do to things like IHS services, BIA, all that kind of stuff? And it's really interesting because the only one that gets that is reliant on blood quantum was it loans and education scholarships and loans. Everything else, IHS services, BIA, ICWA, Indian Child Welfare Act, HUD, it's all based on membership, not on blood. And it's pretty clear that it's up to the tribe to determine what membership means to the tribe. As a matter of fact, and Barbara can correct me if I'm wrong, but Lorraine shared with us that even for IHS services, if a person is not a regular member, our enrollment office issues letters of descendancy. Is that what they're called? Letters of descendancy. What's that? Descendancy ID. ID? Oh, okay. So, sorry. So they actually issue those already. So we're kind of already using this model at the very tip of the iceberg on the lineage side. Other models that are out there, DNA, but we all know if you look at things like Ancestor.com, 23andMe, and things like that, they can tell you your genetic history if you're indigenous, if you're Hispanic, if you're European, but it can't tell you what kind. It can tell you you're indigenous, but it can't tell you you're Laguna or you're Navajo or you're whatever. All it can say is that you have genetic makeup that is indigenous. So the other piece of this is you look at things like, I have Elizabeth Warren here, and you probably saw in the news the whole issue with Elizabeth Warren and Warren and the dynamic that's created for her. But those are going to be things that we're going to have to be thinking about as to how do we address those. Right? So as an example, some of you that are on the YouTube or groups like that, there's I don't know how valid it is, or there's a young lady that she posts on YouTube. She has a video out there saying that she's come out to Laguna. As a matter of fact, on her YouTube video, she has videos of Laguna. I just grew up somewhere maybe back east or something. But her mother told her her father was from Laguna. So she's been coming out here to try to find him. So we have situations like that. Right? So these are things that DNA, maybe will come into play. I don't know. Mississippi Choctaw. This is one that maybe went in probably not a good direction. A number of years ago, the late chairman, Philip Martin, he was sharing with us about they use DNA to try to determine membership. That created a big mess in the community. Because what was coming out from that was, what they were finding out was that, hey, that's really not your dad. It created a lot of not so good dynamic in the community. That's what we don't want here. So that's a model that some tribes have used. So some tribes have made it harder as opposed to easier to be on. Nambe, Zia Pueblo. One of the conversations we've had, I'll show you, I brought up Nambe's, we actually have their presentation, but I just pulled out a few slides from the presentation. But you also have models like Zia, where Zia is a small tribe. So and they're very dependent on grant funding, federal dollars. Grant funding is also, I guess, strengthened with larger populations. So, and Barbara might have been in some of those conversations. You can correct me if I'm wrong or mention it as wrong. But one of the things that I understand they did as a way to grow their population is they said, if you live here on Zia lands, you can apply for membership even though you're not Zia. Right? So that allowance was happening, or has happened. We'll make you X amount of Zia on paper. Doesn't mean you ignore your other tribes or whatever. But on paper, you can become a Zia member. They have probation, they have all those kind of things as well. But that's how Zia is approaching it. That's their model. So, so tribes are looking at this in many different ways. And as I mentioned, Professor Hershey did some research for us, and he shared us over 200 different constitutions that are out there, and how tribes have addressed this issue. Some tribes are very strict. They make it really hard for their tribal members. There's I think it's the Mohawk. The Mohawk, in order to be a tribal member, you have, if you're moving back or whatever, you find out your descendancy, you have to be able to tell them 4 generations back of who your family members are. Some folks have no idea. So I mean, that's great grandparents. Right? So how do you do that? You may not, especially those tribes that were part of that relocation period and families were split apart or whatever, that could be a very difficult thing to do. So, so those are things that are out there. Nambe Pueblo. So Nambe Pueblo, they actually have 3 categories of membership. They have blood quantum. In 1980, as part of their membership law, they started it that you had to have a minimum of 1/4 Indian blood. And I point out the differentiator there, Indian blood, not Nambe blood. So this is a really interesting model. In 1994, they amended their law and reduced it from 1/4 down to 1/16. So you only have to be 1/16 to be Nambe, or considered Nambe, if you're basing it on blood quantum. The second category is native Nambe Indian. So this is their version of lineage. If you can determine or explain, here, this is my father, my grandfather, my aunt, my mother, whatever, then you can be considered for membership. So this is their version of that. The third category is members recognized by the tribal council. I showed you earlier the clause in our constitution that gives the council the authority to determine, regardless of anything else. So this is their version of that. So they have documentation or I guess policy in place to address all these other things. And so what's interesting, like I said, the Code of Federal Regulations, 25 CFR, HUD, ICWA, they all define what an Indian is. These guys are going the other way, they're defining what an Indian's not. So it's interesting on those definitions. This is how they define lineal descent. And that's the resolution that adopted it. All persons who are directly descendant from a Pueblo of Nambe ancestor or someone named on the Pueblo of Nambe's tribal membership register. If you can trace your roots to a Nambe ancestor or to anyone on the membership register, then you can apply for membership. that bottom bullet, when they shared it with it, Margaret, were you in that meeting that day when they presented this to us? No. They came down to Laguna and actually presented this to us. So at the time they were finishing up some work, so that's what that last bullet is referenced. This is unique in their presentation or in their policy. They actually allow non-Indians to become members. And they're called limited members. So it defines any non-Indian person residing on non-Bay lands who has been accepted by the tribal council shall be considered a limited member of the Pueblo. Limited members shall be registered under Pueblo's membership roll guidelines as provided for by the tribal council. I don't, in no way, very clear that this is something we're not suggesting. All we're saying is here are the other models out there, so you can see what other tribes are doing. So, so this is one of the things that one of our sister pueblos here in New Mexico is doing. Any comments? So that being said, this leads us to our idea of recommending belonging, i.e. lineage, as the primary model. As I mentioned, we've given this presentation to council. The earlier presentation you saw, council has seen that a number of times. We've had some really great conversation. One of the things that has come out from those conversations is that as it relates to blood quantum, we're not looking to erase it and just throw it away. We're looking to use that as a baseline. But as I go forward, this would become the mechanism for membership. And when you think about what happened in 2012 when we removed the 2-year restriction, this evolves that work. Because now, when you look at the 2012 amendment, as Cheryl mentioned, she's naturalized, 1/2 Laguna. She may have missed the 2012 or the 1984 or didn't get enrolled for whatever reason. 2012 allows her now to apply for membership because she meets the blood. So we saw that year there was, looking at the enrollment people, we saw probably maybe 300, 400 people, over 300 people that enrolled for membership after we had changed that law or that requirement in 2012. Some of those people were born like in 1960 something that were becoming, they've been in the 50s that now became members after we got the amendment in 2012. So this model, this lineage model, I don't expect that we're going to see a huge surge. Talking with some of these other tribes that use lineage, I think the expectation is we're going to open the floodgates and all these people are going to come in, and that's, I think that was actually in the conversation in 2012, and we didn't. So, so back to this, on your left, this is really the government model. The divide and conquer, the melting pot, the continuation of the extermination and assimilation policy. If you recall back to, some of you have seen the history presentation they've done in the past, when you look at the 1820s and they created the Bureau, or the Indian Affairs, it was created in the Department of War. And it was created there because their purpose was to do away with tribes, not to perpetuate us. So, and when you look at the Ute and a lot of other things that are in museums now, a lot of that stuff came out of that rush when people thought that natives were going to no longer be around. They started this whole grabbing stuff because they saw that because natives were going to be extinct, we need to start collecting. That's how a lot of this stuff got to museums. So that's their model, and as you saw from the graphic, it's going to terminate us at some point because mathematically you can't continue with the fractionalization continuing to decline. It's going to decline to 0. So that's why this model that we have now is not good. On the right side, the Milan and the lineage model really works off the strengths of our, the strengths of our teachings. We decide who belongs. The cultural institutions that already exist, family and community as the identifiers. So again, we had the conversation about language. Language is an identifier. And so it's important that we think about the things that already exist. So I just want to kind of juxtapose us with Nambe. Their model is on the left side, the 1/4 blood quantum. Their amendment on ours, we would use our current roles to serve as the baseline. So we don't just erase the information that's there now. Native Nambe Indian, for us, our equivalent would be the lineage model. And again, we still need to work out what the details would be if we go this path. That's why your input is important. And then Nambe, the members recognized by the tribal council. Right now in our constitution, we already have that authority. The council already has that power. So, and this isn't something new. This has been in all our previous constitutions when we incorporated membership. So that already exists. So for all intents and purposes, we already have a model that's available. So as we begin to wind down the presentation, here are some things that I want you to be thinking about as we open up the floor for conversation. Yes, we've showed you other models, but I want to encourage you to think about what's our model. What works for us? A lot of governments, a lot of companies, a lot of businesses, we tend to look at what others are doing. So we change what we look like, but we don't necessarily change what we do. So I would encourage you to think about what we do and how do we do this differently. The perpetuation of family. Someone had asked earlier about the land assignments and homes and those kind of things. Well, having a home, having family or a home that family can come to is important. So all those kind of things are valuable to this conversation. Our cultural, socioeconomic element are the relationship with the federal government. If you recall in 2012, when we did the 2012 constitutional amendment, one of the things that happened in 2012 is that we removed secretarial approval. Prior to 2012, anything we did, we had to do a Mother May I, right? We had to go to the federal government and say, Interior, can we do this? Interior, can we do that? We removed that in 2012. So when you now talk about sovereignty, we have probably one of the ultimate sovereign strengths and powers, and that's to make our own decision without having to go to the federal government. One of the questions that came out from that was that, well, if we remove the secretarial approval, then that relieves the federal government of their trust obligation to the Pueblo. No, it doesn't. We've met with lawyers and lawyers and lawyers, it doesn't. Right? When you look at the 19 Pueblos, 16 of our sister Pueblos are not constitutional tribes. Navajo Nation's not a constitutional tribe. So tribes like that, whether you're federally recognized, or if you're federally recognized, that's the determinant of the trust obligation, not a constitution. And we are a federally recognized tribe. We're going to have to think about constitutional changes. What does that mean? Other things, again, we talk about the 1984 restriction that was put on in 2 years. And there was some information shared where the parents need to make sure they're enrolling their kids, that's their responsibility. But what about those children that were adopted out? It's not their fault. So it's those kind of situations that we have to think about. Children, spouses, there's a lot of blended families. You marry someone from another tribe, or maybe just not even native, from another community, they have children. How do we work those in? Again, keep in mind the whole idea here is belonging, not exclusion. And so how do we work this? Marriages, divorces, traditional marriages, again, the naturalized piece, right of return. And what we mean by that is, probably the older folks may remember the I don't know what you want to call it, the tradition or the exercise when there was a point in time when if you married someone from another tribe, in particular to the males, you went with that lady, you went with that family, you went with her family. So some of our elders did that. Married outside to another tribe, they relinquished their membership here. Life happened, maybe the spouse passed on or divorced or whatever, but there was no path down. Even though they fulfilled their obligation, they had no path down. So it's those kind of things that what we're thinking about here that may come back out as consideration. Cultural connection. Again, the things we talked about earlier. What does that mean? Strength in numbers, inclusive versus exclusive. And very briefly, one of the things that this commission that we had to do in the very beginning when we started this work, we had to be very intentional that this conversation is not about benefits. We're not talking benefits, right? Because it could get very divisive, when it just becomes about benefits. However, as a short deviation from that conversation, when we talk about inclusivity, that eventually comes to benefits. Right now, we're talking about land assignments. We're talking about PCD. In our Constitution, it says that once the council accepts the annual audit, they can then declare a per capita distribution. It then goes on in the Constitution to say that the per capita distribution does not have to be in cash. It can be in kind. So we don't have to give a check. If the council so chose to give everybody notepads, that's allowable in the Constitution. That's your PCD. And keep it in mind, PCD was not institutionalized until the 1984 Constitution. That's when it went in as something that we now do basically every year. Prior to that, it was sporadic whenever the council felt that they were going to do that. But in 1984, that went in. So now we talk about inclusivity, strength in numbers. And Eloise may remember the conversation when she served with us in council because we were talking about some of this stuff. One of the conversations was, well, instead of giving people a PCD check, why don't we give our tribal members health insurance? Let's give them a health insurance card. But in order for something like that to be viable, as we all know with healthcare plans, you need numbers to make it more cost effective. But that's a better way to share the wealth, right? Because young families are probably, their rates are higher because they're seen as more risky, right? But then you look at, on the other end of the spectrum, people that have worked a long, healthy career, now maybe they retired, but their health, they now have challenges. And that's costly. So on both ends of the spectrum, they're putting out higher amounts for different reasons. So the idea is that, well, if you can give tribal members a health care card, health insurance, they can go to any provider they want. That's much more, when you put money back into young people, to their families, and to their paycheck, they're not having to pay for insurance. On the other end, likewise, folks that are on fixed income don't have to use some of that fixed income for health insurance or prescriptions or whatever, because some of those prescriptions can get expensive. So we use that example in straighten numbers, because as we go forward, maybe this is a different way to think about that stuff. Right? It's a different thought process. So as we begin to move on to the open it up for conversation on this next piece, do we already have the answer in our own structure? And it kind of goes to Alvin's question on language. What are we ashamed of? What are we scared of? If the systems no longer work. Nothing wrong with evolving to maybe a new system. Nothing wrong with that. But what we have, if we just ignore it, we still know our plan system, we still know our plan relations. Even Pauline, she's a little parrot. Her dad and I are in the same plan. And many of you know that in your plan relations as well. So we have systems that help us understand how we belong and who we belong to. And how do we begin to reincorporate these into the system we go forward with. So that being said, before we break out into getting some lunch and into our breakout conversation, this is the question that we hope you can help us with. Is belonging, lineage, the best model for Lavina? If not, do you have a suggestion? Again, it's not going to hurt our feelings. That's the purpose of this. We want to hear from you. We're going to go through a facilitated process after lunch that will help us define, if this is the path, that will help us put that in terms that we can translate that to council. So it's documented, it's your voice. So that being said, we're up on 12:17 right now. Yes, sir.
I hope everybody's okay today. I really appreciate all the efforts that are going into this. One thing I have, as far as, I can't stay for the whole session. I have other obligations that I have to get to. But the lineage model, I do have experience with this here at the Pueblo. I know that the lineage model works. I'm actually a hunting mentor to a young man who his grandmother's a tribal member, and the young man took the bull by the horns and got himself registered into hunter education classes, both here and with the Navajo Nation. And he went through that whole process because of his desire to hunt. And he can't be enrolled here on the Pueblo or naturalized because of the blood quantum requirements. And he ran into roadblocks here at the Pueblo. And we brought this situation to the former director of the ENRD. And he did some out-of-the-box thinking real quick, and he says, well, who are his parents? Who are his grandparents? And we were actually able to trace the lineage back to great-great-grandparents, his grandmother living here on the Pueblo. And so, based on that, the lineage part, we I guess, opened a whole new can of worms and was able to get the young man a hunt. You know, this young man is very interested in everything native. He also wants to participate in the deer dance. You know, our discussions while hunting was about the history of what I know about the Pueblo, as well as other tribes that I have personal experience with. This young man is full of questions. One of the questions he had was really, really simple. And he said, why can't we all just get along and belong to every tribe that I have family in? He went on further and he says, we're all human beings and we separate ourselves, whether it's in our culture our schools, friendships, and our own families. His comment was, I'm not my mom's favorite anymore, but that's okay because I'm still my mom's son. You know, I thought that was pretty interesting because this came from a younger person. And, you know, I support all the efforts that are coming from this forum. And yeah, we have to encourage each other to take this bull by the horns and continue on supporting each other, you know, as people. You know, we can't push each other aside. We can't think of money as a driver. You know, because we open the enrollment up, we can't think, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get a PCD check this year. You know, we need to start thinking along the way of, you know, we're all human beings, we're all people. Goikamech, you know, so we need to do that. And I appreciate your time and efforts, Governor Luarqui, and I ask humbly to be excused for the rest of the day. I appreciate it. Amen.
Thank you for being here and sharing your comments. So with that, like I said, we're up on this last slide on the presentation. And as you've heard why we're recommending Lineage as the model, we've shared some other models that are out there. And like I said, there's a ton. We could probably have half a day just talking different models, but and I'll be confused at the end of the day. But these are some basic ones that I think give us some good reference points. But most importantly, what do we want? Let's go copycat somebody else. What do we want? Right. So that's what I want us to be thinking about. So at this point, we'll go this far on the presentation. And when we come back from lunch, then we're going to go through a little exercise so that we can capture your words on this. But just as housekeeping, food is set up in the next room here. So let's go ahead and we can go ahead and make our way in there. While we're in there, we'll also go through the process of, you got questions, comments. We'll do that during the lunch. Unless you want to bring your food back in here, because we have the microphones in here, we're not going to have that in there. Do you guys want to come back and just get your food and come back in here? Yeah? Okay, that's how I agree with that. So thank you for saying that. So why don't you go ahead and get your food, come back in here, and then we'll open it up for conversation. Thank you for the comments too.
Done. Wow. Give me that go. Give me that go. Wati. Sawati sang. Tawai itu sama sang. Kau nama.
Mà im mắt, rất nhiều không?
This is history. Good. Back yourself. Oh, okay. How are you? Doing okay? Oh, I know. I got something. Oh, awesome. Okay. Okay.
That was something I wanted to try. I'll just, during my lunch break, I'll just.
Oh, the first lady. More first lady. Maybe she was young. Oh, really? Yeah, welcome, Baba.
I wanted to know something gets older.
Yeah.
I've done it. But that's been a big thing. We know more culture, it's more scripture, it's more traditional. You guys do. But then I say, you know, when I wrong by saying, no, we do the same thing. But I just talked to my son and told him, because he's kind of torn. Then I told him, well, it's always been taught to us by the mother. That's always going to be the provider.
That's right.
But you're going to be the one to just go along. I can't tell you. Holding that from the
Yeah.
I just try to stay positive with them. She's sitting with her great grandparents. And so, and I tell her, learn to get out, just keep learning. And they talk to her a lot. I know they say that it's different, but we need to see what, like I tell her, let's keep learning. You know, we can see where the great grandparents.
Right. Yeah.
How many kids have the opportunity to bonds, investing in your money. Because later on, you're gonna need it. And what you're gonna turn this is to sure. Once you don't get back here, you're and what part you're with coming forward. And she does. She just has a lot of it. But that's something that I really
We actually got 3 members and go through them all. So we were all, yeah. Tony was actually one of them.
I know, right? Fingernails. I don't have fingernails.
To be present, so while they have school. And so, that's really cool.
Saturdays? Even after you graduate, you're born to stay. You're gonna be seeing that.
Yeah.
And that's what this village is about.
Yeah, exactly, and that actually came up in council. And so,
It's my Friday.
yeah.
I'm like, no, I don't know. No, just go today. My thing, I thought was some kids over and under.
That's what I was wondering.
Because that's too much on you know? Or go and support your child. Okay, all right.
Yeah. We have more people in the first than
But that was my concern was that, you know, the kids being on there. And being part of that. Because they're the ones that are like, well, we're learning this meaningful. And again, I don't know how you're going to, I mean, if they're already telling you no, you can't.
yeah. Yeah, I'll answer your questions
Okay.
when we get back.
All right.
What's that word? The new generation and, oh, right, okay.
I guess this is just in their own generation. There's just got a lot of younger, like 8th graders, 7th graders, like to better than.
So on this one, are you asking, if we lower the growth quantum, would it be an issue now?
Yes.
Okay.
Like is that an issue now that we're coming into the fourth corner?
Okay.
Or if we discuss it, we'll just have to come up.
Yeah, we would have probably worse option.
It's a bit of
Now we're having about 2 hours. Yeah, I'll answer your questions.
Thank you. Here you go. Thank you, Evan.
I didn't do anything.
Good, come on.
She's doing good. She's at work right now.
Oh, is she?
Yeah.
Brothers?
One's at work, one's traveling, and one's I don't know.
Well, I hope Ben's at work.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
Hey, there's food in there if you guys want to come get some.
I was waiting for the line.
Yeah, it's calming down now.
Hey.
Get seconds or thirds, everybody. There's a lot of food. Help yourself.
Like some iced tea. Yes, sir. Iced tea, sir. Oh, you can have some iced tea. Sure. It's gonna be You're welcome. Would you like some iced tea? I got some, sure.
How is it, sir?
Good. I got your invoice, so I'll start working on getting that process. I'll get you.
Email Bobby. It was a generic for my real estate photography.
Right.
So like, well,
That's okay. We're good. All right. Cool.
thank you.
Yep.
We'll go ahead and open up, once he gets done with that piece of it, we'll open up for questions and comments. Excuse me. Questions and comments, and try to finish that by maybe 10 after 1 or something like that. Just we're kind of tight on time here, so we can wrap up these by 2:30 at the latest today. So with that, before he gets on the floor, Mark.
We leave it here a little bit. We're gonna drive down and see him in when did you come? Oh, I hear it. Thank you. And also, I have a few, just one or two things that before I leave is our responsibility as our own traditional values. You know, we talk about a lot of this stuff in the council about how we understand, not even all of us in the council understanding what our constitution is all about. Or living not in the Lumas ordinance, I think that it's our responsibility to read those, and even for the ones that are not here, for them to have that responsibility to understand those things, because we're always expecting others to do that for us. So we need to understand that we do have a certain responsibility as being tribal members. Or even as a lineage goes, there is a, I know I talked to one of the guys at training not too long ago, there was a guy from Zuni that was saying that at one time there were 700 members, and that's when the smallpox came, and that's when the Spaniards and all them brought that disease. But now there are 12,000 members out there. And how did they get populated here? It's because of the Pueblos, the Navajos, and the Hopi. They're all integrated in that. And also they did find the same dialect down in Mexico, where the Noah tribe, I believe, has the same dialect as Zuni. So they're finding all those things there. And we also, in our creation stories, have to have people that were related to down south. So it's real important to understand those things and how we generate all this, or how we come together to understand. But I just leave you with that thought about the responsibilities to get that out there, involve all these people, even your relatives, make them aware of that. And thank you for the food. That was
again, just going off of that, some of the stuff that we've been talking about, this is a good time to talk about those things. Again, and in short, again, just really saying that as we're eating, we're always being taught. That's some of the things I grew up with, is that my grandpa used to always tell me, while we're eating, start talking about good things. And this is really a good conversation to take in while you're eating. That part of the spirituality that we talked about. All of that comes into combined again with also again going into the roots of who we are. Lineage, basically, lineage. So again, with that being said, I know there was some discussion or questions about how it affects the benefits, or even those talks about benefits, PCD, those kinds of things. But this one here is, again, with the thanks, I would thank you to Professor Hershey for some of the things that he's been working with us as well, some of the information. And one of the questions that came up at one time, I think at the last conference, was that, this is the question exactly, in consideration of federal statutory benefits, will tribal members eligible for federal benefits be compromised if we focus on tribal membership versus blood quantum? With that being said, that was one of the questions that came up. With that being said, again, there's really a short answer to that. basically it's no. No, and there's not any kind of federal benefits that are going to be impacted directly if we were to change it from blood quantum to lineage. Having said that, again, because it's identified that there's 10 statutory benefits that are provided to tribal membership based on tribal membership. On the other hand, they've also identified one statutory benefit that's based on blood quantum. That's only one. So again, some of the statutes, or some of the benefits, that don't require blood as a means of utilizing these services are like in health services. Again, because it was established at that time for obtaining a beneficiary, like an identification card, all you needed was to be a member in a federally recognized tribe to be determined by the individual tribe or the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Again, documentation that the applicant meets the requirements for tribal membership as prescribed by the charter, articles of incorporation, or other legal instruments or traditional process of the tribe have been officially designated as a tribal member by an authorized tribal official or body. It says nothing about use of blood quantum at that with the healthcare services. And it also goes into food stamps, such as SNAP. Because that's a federal program, there's no really requirements other than income, low income. That's where SNAP is basically, for low income families. And it has nothing to do with blood criteria as well. Other benefits that we can, if it's not going to be federally or it's not going to be impacted negatively, are also some of the job placement and training programs, Indian Child Welfare Act. That's one thing that we've been talking about in council as well, the ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act. You might have heard that at some of your village meetings, how some of the things are impacting our tribes as well. And again, the statute for that ICWA, it says the statutory benefits flowing from ICWA apply to children who are members of federally recognized tribes or potential members. It's up to the tribes to determine who belongs. Again, it has nothing to do with blood. There's other adult education programs that we can also continue to receive as a benefit, and it does not require blood quantum. The only other really, I think, couple of things that were kind of outstanding was that, again, the Indian Equalization School Program, and those are basically BIA funded, schools, like for what do you call them? Like tribally operated day schools or boarding schools. That's where that one comes into effect. With that one, a member, it says that a member, or at least it needs to be at least 1/4 Indian blood, or a descendant of a member of a tribe that is eligible for special programs. And that's, again, like I said, it does state that at least one of the members needs to be at least 1/4 Indian blood, and descendants of the member of that tribe are eligible. So if you're a descendant of a 1/4 Indian blood person, your descendant is also eligible for those programs. Again, it doesn't really, it impacts blood in some way, but also, again, with the descendants, your descendants can still, whether they meet the blood criteria or not, as long as they're a descendant of a 1/4 Indian blood person. Loan to Indians from revolving loan funds, housing improvements, housing urban development, and Indian housing, Indian business development programs, those are not going to negatively be impacted. So we're able to continue to get those benefits regardless of what, if we went with the lineage model. So those are the ones that don't require any kind of blood, blood quantum. It's all, so as long as you're part of a federally recognized tribe. The only one that was found was appropriations for educational loans and grants. Because that one says an Indian student seeking to receive loan or grants for attending accredited college or vocational schools outside the reservation must have at least 1/4 Indian blood to be eligible. So again, funds are appropriated by Congress for this educational piece and may be used for educational loans and grants to 8 students of 1/4 or more Indian. It says 1/4 or more degree of Indian blood. It's not specifically saying that you have to be Laguna or other, as long as you're from a federally recognized tribe. Indian affairs or trusts are restricted land. Okay, where am I now? anyway, those are some of the things that we have been impacted by, some of the things, positive impacts that we can still continue to use, continue to, I guess, utilize in the ways under of our federal government or our federal programs, other than the appropriation for educational loans and grants. So I guess the overwhelming majority of statutory benefits provided to tribal members will be retained if tribes switches from blood quantum to lineal descent. It goes on to say that although tribal members may lose appropriations for educational loans or grants if they alter the blood quantum requirements, the strength of the following traditional methods of tribal membership may offset the loss of grants and loans. For tribal members who attend universities or vocational schools outside of the reservation. Again, lastly, it was recommended looking at whether exceptions may apply to that 25 CFR 1/4 blood quantum eligibility requirement. So those are some of the things that had come up with this research that has been compiled by Dr. Hershey. And again, in closing, it just says Indian. When you talk about Indian, who is an Indian? What is an Indian? Indian means a person who is a member of, or is at least 1/4 degree Indian blood descendant of a member of an Indian tribe, and is eligible for the special programs and services provided by the United States through the Bureau of Indian Affairs to Indians because of the status of Indian. So that kind of, it just kind of goes into some of the requirements under the BIA, those kinds of things. But again, like I said, if you guys start thinking about this, we want to move this forward with getting away from blood quantum. That's going to be up to you guys. But again, just offering some of the benefits that we have been talking about will not be impacted by if we change from blood quantum to lineage. That's a word I want you guys also to continue to think about. Thought. How are you going to think about these? A thought. Those are thoughts that we're putting in your head as of today. Remember, we gave you 2 words already. And again, so some of those are about lineage. Those are things, like I said, the roots of where you come from, who you belong to, where you belong, who you belong to as a tribe. You start thinking about how some of the questions, like the question that was up there, what's going to happen if we change, or how we're going to use this. So those are very important things that we want you to consider as you start with your work groups. And really, that's really my part in a really quick nutshell. I know there were some questions on, again, benefits. But again, it won't negatively impact us if we were to make a change. But again, that's your decision. No, I will. Go ahead. Sure.
So as you're thinking about questions you might have, again, I'll encourage you to help yourself if it's still out there. We had a few questions that were presented to us. One was, why was the blood quantum lowered to 1/4, and would this be an issue now? So as I mentioned earlier, in 1984, the constitutional amendment that took place lowered the blood quantum from 1/2 down to 1/4. And the reason for that is you were having fewer and fewer people that were qualifying at the 1/2 blood level. So you were having less and less members coming into Laguna because they couldn't meet the 1/2 blood quantum. So in order to try to keep our population up, that's why they lowered it to 1/4. And so would this be an issue now? Well, I guess it depends on what lens we're looking at. And right now, the lens we're looking through is that it is an issue right now. And that's why we're addressing this, because as you saw that projection, if we go out 30 years, we're going to have about 400 tribal members left if we did nothing. Right? So it causes us to go away. It's really what it does. And you also heard that in the last 10 years, you've only had 4 people, or less than 5, recognized as 4/4. So very, very few, right? The other question was, if the blood quantum was not lowered, then this would not be an issue. It's more of a comment. Again, it goes back to the lens that we're looking at. You know, if it was not lowered, I just mentioned what the numbers look like. The other suggestion was, why not add younger people, 18 years, younger or older, millennials, to be a part of the commission members. We actually had members, young people, as a part of the group because from the November, the Who Belongs conference, that came out loud and clear, include the young people. So we had 3 members, 3 young people as a part of the group, but because they missed a couple meetings here and there or whatnot, and weren't able to attend, as we went through the process in updating Governor, then he pulled them off. So we're still waiting for if someone else is going to get appointed. So that's why we don't have any young people sitting up here with us. But that was our original plan. Our plan was kind of gutted with the inclusion of our young people. So we're just kind of waiting if we're going to have some more folks put on the board with us. If we want the younger generation to belong, we know what is happening. The younger generation can relate to their own as well. So, and that's exactly why we wanted to have the session today. And unfortunately, you know, we didn't get a good turnout, but we can't force anybody to be here, you know. And so, but I do hope that in some form or fashion they get the information, or there's a way to hear their voice a little bit more, because I think going into the future, they are going to be the ones, you know, taking care of this situation. So those are some of the suggestions, comments, and questions that were shared with us. Before we get into the work session, we're going to ask you to do a little bit of work for us. Are there any other questions or comments on this last piece of the presentation? Just want to also acknowledge the Tribal Secretary, Mr. Trujillo, that's just come in. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. So we're going to take a few questions here, and then we're going to go ahead and get into the work session. And so we have Pauline and Pat.
Upon listening to what Mr. Chermaya presented, all the BIA and the hospital requirements is a 4th blood, right? To be eligible to be serviced. If by chance, the blood quantum was changed to 1/16, what will happen to all the services that require a 4th blood? That's just a question I was thinking, because some of our people don't want to go lineage, and if it's reduced to 1/16, are we going to lose everything? They don't go by blood. Thank you.
So the information that that Ed just shared with you, the easy answer is no, because these policies are based on membership, not on blood.
Oh, okay.
So how you determine your membership, they leave that solely up to the tribe. So the only one that was affected was the statutory, or on the appropriations for educational loans and grants. That's the only one that has a 1/4 blood requirement. Well, IHS, BIA, ICWA, HUD doesn't get affected.
Anyway, earlier in this morning session, we were talking about trying to get more people here, trying to get more interested people here, especially the young people. And my comment is, I know there's a couple of villages. We have a couple of villages that either don't allow women to their village meeting, or if they allow women, the women aren't allowed to speak. And I think that's hindering a lot of the information that could go out. For example, if you look around the room, the majority here is women. And I think if some of these villages that can start allowing women to come to their meeting, I think they would have a lot more input, and I think a lot more people would start to participate in sessions like this. It's to their discretion, but if they would allow women to come to their meetings or to speak at their meetings, there would be a lot more participation, and it would, like I said, it would be to their discretion what, like say, I know Mesita doesn't allow women at their meeting, but maybe if they start allowing them to come when this type of thing is being presented, this blood quantum thing or the lineage meeting, if that's going to be presented at that session, then maybe I think if they would use their discretion and start allowing women. And most of the village meetings are attended mostly by men, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but men aren't good messengers to give information out. For example, my husband went to the village meeting several weeks ago. When he came home, I said, "Come on, what was all discussed at the village meeting?" I wanted to know what the council minutes were and stuff. He said, "Oh, we have ditch work Saturday." That was his answer, and I'm like, that's not what I meant. But that's my comment. If maybe, like I said, it's women that come to these gatherings. Thank you.
Pat, just come back. When you say, us ladies are very local over there, so you want to know, come to the SNAP meeting.
So again, I think at the village level, that's above our pay grade as well. But that's also, I think, one of the reasons why we wanted to have this conversation in a general context, not go to each of the villages, because we end up having to manage each village's own perspective, and this is a Pueblo-wide issue, right? And so as far as each village, I can't comment on how they run their own villages or each village runs, but I think for this purpose, it's really important that we have a Pueblo-wide view on this topic, because it affects everybody, going forward. So, do we have any other questions, comments, thoughts before we? Yes, ma'am.
Maybe you should schedule an assembly at the high school with the students and present this to them, because they're the ones that are going to make this work or not. So if you had an assembly, maybe even work with Acoma to have their students allowed to come, because they're in the same situation too. And make up this presentation about the naturalization, what it means, lineage, what it means, having children within your own people, what it means. Because like I said, we can't control who our students fall in love with. But if they have an idea, then they become more responsible on their choice. And then that's maybe where it should go. Since they can't come to us, maybe we should go to them.
So if you didn't hear her comment, the suggestion that she shared was that maybe we should have an assembly or some type of larger gathering at the school, so they're not going to come here, maybe we go to them. So that's a pretty good suggestion, and we can consider that. And so I think it's important that we do have the voice of the young folks, and on that note, we do have some young folks sitting in the room, and we've not heard from you. And so I want to hear if you have any comments or thoughts before we go to the next piece, because this is your time. Any young folks? No, I'll come back to Paul.
Oh, well, I just want to say that it's a good suggestion too. I agree with you because yes, I am a senior at the high school and we should have this. If Acoma has it, then we should too. And you know, it's kind of like gets me like sad because I hardly see any of my generation here. Like now, I only see myself here. You know, as for Yagi and the other ones, you know, like I'm pretty sure like we can do a better job. Like we can have flyers. I can like just get like the word out. Like our next session that's coming up next weekend. Like I would like to have like one of like the committee members to come to the school and, you know, just like call out like the Laguna kids, you know, like, hey, we're having this session, you guys want to come? Like at least get involved. And you know, like I'm proud of myself because like I got up today and I was like, oh, I'm like, yes, like this is interesting. Like this is something where I need to be and what I need to know. Because yes, it is affecting my generation and it's gonna affect the others. And you know, and I'm really glad to see like 1% of the people here out of like the whole 100%. And you know, it's like what we're talking about is like really like interesting to me. Because like if I didn't know about this, then you know, I'd be going off marrying whoever, having so many different kids with so many different guys, having kids here and there. But like, I mean, like, yeah, like my mom, like she told me, you know, like you gotta be careful for like these boys that talk to me because, you know, we're all related, we're all one, like they say. And, you know, it's like, well, who do I marry? Who am I gonna have kids with? Like, I can't marry my cousin brother, you know, it's ridiculous because like how like so many people are here and like there's like many more people that went to the Who Belongs in November. Like why can't other people come instead of just certain people? Like if we're all one, then everybody should be all involved, not just certain people. And you know, and I thank everybody for coming out, spending their day giving out questions, comments, whatever. And you know, and it's kind of difficult for me because like I'm like trying to learn our language, but at the same time it's hard because like I get made fun of. And it's like, well, okay, well, I don't want to do our language no more. But it's like, you have to learn. You have to teach the younger ones. And you know, and I ride the bus and there's these kids that just brighten my day so much. And you know, and it's good that these parents can come with their children, whether if they're 18 or not. You know, and as of myself, I'm 18, and you know, and it's scary. Because once you look north, east, west, south, it's everything. You see the whole world. And you know, everybody's gonna have difficulties, but not as long as we have the support, your guys' support, our council support, our staff support. And with the village meetings, I try to go to the village meetings. But there's just some days I can't because I have homework. And now I'm getting into college and it's gonna be very challenging and stressful. And I just finished my semester and you know, and it went good. And it like I said, I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of where I come from. I'm proud of to be here, to be Laguna. And you know, like I have brothers and sisters that are like part Isleta, part Navajo, part Hopi, you know, and like that's not gonna change how I feel about my brother or sister. You know, we're still one. We're still gonna be brother and sister, no matter what. You know, but like I said, like I'm proud of everybody that came up today. you know, and it like, to me, like, it brings like so much like happiness to me because I see everybody here. You know, it's gonna be the same people, different people, you know, but it don't matter. I'm still happy to see everybody here. But thank you.
Thank you, DeHaven. She put out something that I think is really good, and I'd like to take you up with it, and that is helping to coordinate maybe another event, maybe in conjunction with Tina and the youth group that maybe does another circle at this and tries to get a larger turnout. So I'd like to really take you up on that and see if maybe we can talk afterwards and figure out how we might be able to pull this together for that event, whether it's an assembly or it's, you know, whatever, because we not only Laguna Acna, but we got the middle school, we got Santa Fe Indian School, we got kids at NACA. So and I think the APS school system, I mean, there's a huge amount of Laguna students that are there. So how we capture those students, audience, would be really great, and if you can help us with that, that'll be awesome. The other thing she mentioned, and Eloise mentioned this as well, the participation or lack thereof. You know, and I think we all know in our community, it's you can put signs up, you can put somebody on the top of the building and yell all day long that this is good, and people won't show up. You know, and I was telling a couple that I think the reality, and maybe sometimes we don't like to look in the mirror, right? But when we look in the mirror, sometimes we take some of these resources or these opportunities for granted. You know, I was just saying, you know, not to compare in a negative way, but you know, when we were in Barstow last week, we had a full room, and everybody was there, and they stayed all day. You know, they really made the effort to be there and participate. You know, and I hope that we don't take it for granted, but sometimes, again, this session isn't unique. You know, we have meetings where folks come and or very few come. You know, and but we hope that we can kind of continue to move forward and don't give up hope that folks aren't interested. I think, you know, for whatever reason, we just want to stay positive that folks are going to stay involved. Any other younger folks want to make comments? Not yet. Think about it. Okay, Pauline.
I just have one question, but I got hurt feelings when my grandfather told me, let the young ones talk first. I guess I'm in the way I was. No, my question is, after all our sessions, or after all the sessions you have on this topic, is it going to be the council's decision to do it, or is it going to be put on a ballot so that the people can vote on it? You know, how is it going to, or how are you taking this to the rest of the people so that they have their say on this? And all of us here have our say, but the ones that aren't here, are they going to be able to vote on it, or how are we going to get their input from this?
Thank you for the question. So it was really a process question of, you know, so what next? What happens after this? So that's, as a part of this, we're still at the stage of gathering information, gathering feedback from the community that will then be provided to council. So council can then make the determination as to whether or not we go down the path of a referendum, i.e. a vote, to make this change. So the council is not at a place to where they can do that yet until they get more feedback. And we still have a number of other community presentations scheduled, because once we give this feedback to council, the next step in that process is then what are those constitutional changes, those potential constitutional changes. So it'll kind of shift to then a constitutional conversation, you know, as to, now here are the changes that are going to have to be made to have something like this happen.
Those constitutional changes, will they be just council, or will it be brought back to the people?
So as I just said, we'll have more community sessions, that those constitutional conversations will come back. Because those questions, if you recall, just using as an example, the 2012 amendment, we had community sessions on what the referendum, what the vote was going to be, right? So we could try to educate folks as to what that change was going to be. So very similar process will be used to come back to say, now here's what we're asking your consideration to vote on. So a big piece of that is going to be another round of educating on here's what the referendum vote is going to be. Because council cannot change the Constitution by itself. The only thing council can do is call for the vote, call for a referendum. That's all they can do. But of course we have to structure the question as to what we're going to vote on. But council can't change the Constitution by itself. It's going to take a vote. So it will come back to the folks for feedback and ultimately a vote if that's what the pathway we're doing. Did I answer your question? Yes. Okay.
Mr. Orr, I have a question. If Haven is going to do this challenge with her peers, then because they already did the deadline for next Saturday, are they going to be able to call in and say, yes, we can be added to the list to come for next Saturday?
So the question is that the Haven and the younger folks are going to take on this challenge to get more folks here, or younger folks here. Will they be added onto the list? Absolutely. The only reason we're doing RSVPs is to help us on the budget side, so we know how much food to order. That's really what we're doing the RSVP for. But if folks still want to come, gosh, man, I would invite folks as much as possible to come. So there's no cap on who can and cannot come, or the deadlines to sign up. Did I see any other questions, comments?
Right now, to me, I'm a facts person, and a lot of the information that has been expressed since November till now has been kind of playing on my emotions, and I'm not an emotional person. I deal with facts, history, fractions, mathematics, you know. So right now, the way, and I don't mean to be offensive to anyone, because I mean, I've done this job for 19 years now. And I racked my brain. I came here because I was hoping that the people here would share information about naturalization and what comments, because I can hear it from all over, you know, the entire tribal member database is where I collect my information and the people who I talk to. And one of the things that I had first questioned when I started working in the enrollment office was the orientation, and how Cheryl said about getting an orientation. We had this conversation about the convocation, remember, before that happened. So if it goes back to an orientation, and these are some of my questions of, you know, with who belongs and enrollment, the migration, since Easter stories are coming up soon. With Laguna, we have our own migration story from our people and where they came. But like, how is the Pueblo of Laguna's migration story? Because that would be separate. So you have the group of people, and that's family. Then you have the group of members that have established Pueblo of Laguna here. And those are some of my questions that I need answered, like, why here? You know, what is it to be Laguna? Are we connected to a piece of land? Because that's, you know, physical. Language, that's something you carry in your heart and your mind. And I've been going round and round about this since I worked here, and I have all these questions and ask people. But, you know, in this presentation, when you're expressing it, especially to the youth, and if they have a question, and a lot of them don't speak up because they're saying my questions, you know. If you're going to determine the community and body living here, what does it mean to be Laguna, and why are we so connected to here? So if you have a group of people who live in Barstow who speak our language, why don't they come home? And like how Alvin said, it's a nice place to live. You know, what is it here? Why are we trying to keep this place protected or survive here? And those are some of my questions to determine how, you know, the enrollment concept and how does that play into it. Because if you can't answer, you know, how they say you have to know where you've been before you know who you are type thing, then shouldn't that be expressed to the next group who's coming in? Because right now this is supposed to be the topic of naturalized members. So if we have the youth and we can't communicate in our own language and we have to communicate to them somehow, how do we identify and why is it that we're here at this area, you know, this location? And then it goes into the resources and just reading through this blood quantum where it has the federal government and their legal duties to uphold treaty obligations. And I had this discussion with my coworkers because we've gotten in trouble for not helping certain people because they're not tribal members, like just recently for the feast. An individual came to our office who needed our services, but he wasn't a tribal member. So who are we obligated to help? You know, those are the kind of questions like if you're here as a body and who are we obligated rather than who belongs? So these are questions that I have had. So rather than saying who belongs, and to me that's kind of offensive as an enrollment clerk because whatever laws that are there, whether they're morally correct or because that's the law and we have to follow it, you know, who belongs is kind of a barrier because this is my job to protect whatever resources we have here rather than just randomly handing out an ID number and saying you're Laguna. That way someone else can identify who knows nothing or hasn't ever been here. Like you're saying, this person from the YouTube video whose alleged father is Laguna and she's going around taking videos to look for her father. You know, that's the kind of individuals who we end up protecting our tribal members because if we met this person, which I don't think she's ever contacted our office, those are the kind of questions we get asked often where people try to connect here, whether it be on Ancestry.com or if they do have and meet that blood quantum lineage. And those who are adopted, you know, they eventually find out and come back and try to get enrolled. So if we're obligated, and that's one of the discussions what I had asked, why are they going to Barstow? And, you know, after going through the We core values, it came out to be that you're obligated to share this information with them. That's where I understood it. And to try not to be mean in a way, because if you have resources here, whether it be your language, the land, your children, you know, you have to protect that somehow. So if we're gonna do away with blood quantum or lower it, that's, you know, the kind of questions which you have to kind of be iffy about in a way because we already have the highway driving through here. We have the railroad, you know, just random people come through Laguna all the time. So it's kind of a roundabout thing where it goes all over the place, but these are just some questions that I've had is like, if you would be able to provide information on the two forms of Laguna, which is our migration and the Easter story, which is told in the council room where women, again, aren't allowed to hear those stories. It's supposed to be shared back and communicated to us. Then you have the Laguna Pueblo with the enrollment and can explain how the census took place, because with some of the information that has been provided with that census information, if you consider how the census is done nowadays, it's because you were residing in this area why you were put on that census. It didn't state whether you met a blood quantum or not. It's just because you were residing here why you were put on that list of people. It didn't require a blood quantum, and if they did put one, they put your total Indian blood. It didn't mean you were Laguna, like Four Force Laguna. It just meant, you know, okay, you're living here, what's your name, what's your date of birth, how much Indian are you? And they put that. So if you can kind of explain that and help people, because a lot of the times when I'm going through the paperwork and the files, I've had to backtrack and question, why did they do this? You know, this is like really messed up now because I don't have the people to ask these questions. But if you go through all the papers and look, then you kind of have an idea of why. So like with that 1940 census, those were just the people who were residing here at the time. Then they had children, it went down and down. Then we got resources with the uranium and the railroad. Then they had to provide an application for those people, and that's pretty much how the enrollment established, was that application to give out the income from the resources that we had. So that is explained to kind of help the people, not, because if you put out the information how you're doing now, it's confusing and you kind of question, gosh, we're messed up. Why are we paying people to be tribal members because they get PCD? So, well, because that's the application process, is you had to fill out your application, state how much your Laguna blood was. At that time it was a fourth or half. So if you met that half, you know, you got those resources, which wasn't meant to be mean, but we had this amount of money to share with people. And that's the thing, is with the benefits, I don't really think the word should be benefits, it's resources. So like with the language, that's a resource, a land is our resource, rather than the benefits of getting an education, which getting an education, you have to find those resources. So if there could be more, I guess maybe some tweaking of the language, and maybe a helpful story of where these two Laguna groups are coming from the migration and enrollment, to kind of give a better idea to help make it flow better. Because a lot of the times you have the groups of the elderly who will tell you, you know, straight out, you have to, and then it's just you have to. And then you kind of missing the gap in between, like how everyone's saying they can't have children because of the blood quantum, your relations, you know, that was a have to, you can't do that. And now what we're seeing in our office is, if you have, you know, if you're, like me, in my case, I'm half Laguna, and I only have one daughter. I never decided to marry a Laguna man because it's the same thing with relations. You know, I'm practically related to everyone too, and I have the talk with my daughter, and I tell her straight out, you can have children with any Indian man as long as you can get them enrolled somewhere, then you can marry whoever you love. So it's like you're, because of the blood quantum, this is what you're kind of forcing your children to do, is in order to maintain your identity and your connection to this area, that's what I'm forcing my daughter to do. So, you know, these are just questions and some of the things that you have to think about with the youth, because right now I have two dear sons. One is a naturalized member and one is a descendant of a tribal member. He's enrolled somewhere else, but he lives here, participates here, does everything here. And in a way, like how they were talking about the hunter safety course in hunting, it goes back and forth, because with me, my mom's from Gila River, I recently requested a CIB and a family tree. They couldn't give me the family tree because of confidential issues. But again, for me to go out to Gila River and start asking for stuff, in a way, I'm already receiving them here, and that would be greedy on my part. You know, you can't just be disrespectful and expect to, like, be a tribal member and function how a tribal member would be doing out there. So, and there's lines that you kind of have to be watchful for, otherwise we're just kind of have a free-for-all in a way. And with our office, I would wish our office would be more included in some of these discussions with your group, because there's 3 of us there, but we all see it differently. And that way we can at least walk and help through the process. And I would hope that besides just Elsie, that maybe someone from the enrollment office should be here to answer the questions that the people have, because it's depending on, you know, how long you've been there and the experiences you have had. Each scenario is different, so if somebody brought a application, there's no guarantee it's going to meet that one line in the Constitution. So if you can kind of make us be here, you know, from the enrollment office, that would probably help out a lot too.
Thank you, Barbara, for your comments there. Maybe just trying to go backwards on the comments. So as it relates to the enrollment, excuse me, it relates to the enrollment office. Lorraine Silva is our designated person to go to. The only reason we haven't really pulled her in is because there's really nothing new that we need her to add to right now, because a lot of the information you're talking about factual, she's provided us a lot of this information. So that's what we based it on, and she's helped clarify, because we have questions too, you know, so she's helped to clarify. She's been a great resource for us. So so when we get to a point to where we need her technical support, we'll pull her in again. If we need others, then you know, we'll yourself or others, then I think we can make that decision when we get there. Because I suspect we will, because if the council decides to move forward, we're probably going to need some additional guidance in some of this stuff. So Lorraine is right now our designated person, and when we present it to council on the commission, so she's recognized per the minutes as to that point of contact to help us out. Now, as far as factual, non-factual versus the migration story, so you know the migration story and Shabbat, all those kind of things, we had a really good conversation in council about it as well. And you know, as it relates to the traditional side, and long story short, for us as a commission, the traditional side, the Kiva side, that's not our charge. Right? So, and you pointed out something I think very clear is that, you know, one family to the next, they have different versions, and it's not up to us to try to determine, you know, who's right or who's wrong. So this is really about, you know, membership based on the model or the system that we have now. You know, whether it's blood quantum, whether we continue, whether we have an alternative, and what is that? And so when we look at factual, that's why we put up the ordinances, we put up those kind of things that we've been able to find specific to us. So, and granted, we may not have everything, but I think it's really, we've tried to do our best in that. So that's why if there's pieces we're missing, by all means, please share it with us. You had a question?
With the discussion we had here, and now that we know those naturalized tribal members don't receive certain benefits, is there a way that you can take that back to council and try to get them those benefits?
So last year, and so this, for those of you that are new to the conversation, this didn't start just this year. I mean, it's been, you know, this commission was actually stood up in 2013, and the work has been a little sporadic, but the last probably 2 years, 2.5 years, we've been pretty aggressively going on this. That conversation has come up in council a couple years ago. And as a matter of fact, Quaddy staff officer at the time got up and said, we need to fix this, because we're saying naturalized members can't get this, but the ordinance says something different. So it's a matter of, to Pat's point, getting council on their horse to do their work, you know, to be able to make that connection. Because it puts your office in a predicament, it puts us in a predicament in violation of our own law. So those things do need to get corrected. You mentioned benefits earlier as well. So when you look at the 1934 IRA, that was a big driver as to why the Pueblo chose that path, because there was benefits tied to it. So there's a lot of other pieces that I think would tie to this, and do tie to this, right? But you know, our task is very, very specific as to this particular model. Those other elements of then what's the process of how that happens, that will come later.
I have a question as to that though, like if you were a group of people, what are the requirements to create a tribe? You know, just from scratch. Like, do you have to have a certain language, like a lab base, or even if you don't have the blood quantum, what is the federal requirement to become a federally recognized tribe?
So if you didn't hear her question was, what is the requirement to become a federally recognized tribe? So you know, like right now, the Department of Interior, and it's been for a number of years, they actually have a division there that focuses on recognition of tribes, state recognized tribes, or federally recognized tribes that are out there. And so I don't know that there's a specific requirement that says you have to have X amount of land base, you have to speak language, you have to do this. I mean, you look at some of the tribes, especially in California, where there's 50 people that make up the tribe. And so none of them speak their language. They have a casino, the land base is 20 acres. So I don't know that there's any specific requirement that says this is what qualifies you as a tribe. I'm sure there are some things in there, I just don't know what they are. Okay, so did I answer your as best as possible? Okay, so she asked some really key questions, and some of the questions that she has or comments that she shared are important. But I think for us as a commission, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know that we're at a place where we can answer some of those, because some of them are policy and procedure, and that's again, that falls back on the council's lap to decide how they do it or not. Because as an example, she mentioned that if somebody doesn't meet this ABC requirement in the application, then they don't qualify, right? Contradictory to the Constitution, where the council can say, we don't care what the paperwork says, we're going to allow them to be a member. Article 2, section, what was that? Section F. So the council can override that. So those are things, to her point, we need to fix those connections. So with that, are there any other comments, questions? Louise, I think Irvin has a question. We'll take Irvin, and then we're going to wrap up so we can get to the third piece.
Thank you. Richard, I'll say this. When I was born and brought here, I wasn't a member of the tribe. I was under the Veterans of Foreign Wars for I don't know how many years, because I was too little to know what was all going on with that. But I assumed, Barbara, that I'm a Laguna member, because my father, Paul Raymond Natsaway, was a prisoner of war. And he and my mother died when they were in their 30s. And we were never recognized. We were just automatically were placed under the Veterans VA. And the only way, I guess, my Aunt Ruth pursued, because she knew her brother was a Powhati guy, and she wanted us to be recognized as Laguna members, although we're part northern from the Pueblo of San Juan. And I've never really investigated or even inquired. I just assumed that I was a Laguna member. But during that time, I believe there was an attorney named Philip Ashby for the tribe. He was the one that had to work all the whatever needed to be done according to a lawyer so that we could be recognized by the Pueblo. But I don't know who the governor was, and I don't intend to investigate it. But at that time, the governor did not even want to recognize my brother and I as children of a Laguna Pueblo, was a prisoner of war. So I still, I'm questioning, is my membership valid? But according to my CIB and everything that has followed me up to this time, I still am considered a Pueblo member. And it does affect you. And as Barbara, you ask these important questions, and the things that we put you, the enrollment, through when we come there, and we assume that we're going to be members and all that.
But right now, my family is going toward naturalization. My kids are like you, they don't want to marry here because most of the ones are relatives, but although they're part San Domingo and part Laguna now. So this is where, you know, we get to really question. And those that are Laguna that are off away, sometimes they don't have the concerns of what you're having right here, the questioning. And then you are right, you desire someone to input to you so that you know what direction you're gonna go, or that you'll be there as a helping resource to us that go there to the enrollment office. You know, even when I got married with Dennis, I went over to the enrollment and I asked them if I could get a certificate of birth, and they couldn't help me. That's not their fault. They told me I'd have to go to Winslow or Barstow to see if I could get a birth certificate there. So in order that way, I got discouraged, and I don't want to file for anything like reclamation that's supposed to be a benefit, because I would have to then entitle all the children of Dennis Smith Jr. in that. And I don't know if I'm strong enough or willing enough to do that. But it's based on that birth certificate. And they don't have any, you know, the responsibility to me. I have to do it myself. You know, so these little things do throw a kinker, and you're not able to kind of become short-winded there on that one. But this is all that I wanted to share with you folks here. So I still question it, but as far as what I know now, I'm still supposedly a tribal member. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Eloise. And I think, you know, what's important here as we go through this is this effort that council has tasked us to do is also looking at ways, how do we make it easier, not harder, to be a member? Right now, the system's hard to be a member, right? And so it's really important that we work through and think through in those processes. So I'm going to give Irwin the last comment here, and then we're going to break out into our sessions.
Oi, quasi sabe que não sei. Daí é que tem no showskit, Thomas. Aí chega o estima, aí estimo de carro com some toases. Aí tu não é no esquema. Eu acho que só tu, estamos estudando da carne suicide. É que o EITS tu não acha na casa. Se me na chama eu me estinei aqui só tu. É chane me está me her watching stick esta. No eu how is go se vamos. You já acho com acha. Se cai daí só tu niti. Sim, eu temos que fazer tem carro todo estou na nem aqui só tu mas. Ok. Eu tomas não é neste isso, se não é conhecer. Porque estou na que mais se torna o aço, mix caco. Já tem a moça não. Se as caco was dona se eu se eu amo simita. Se dona mix caco, vamos tomar melhor que só tom. Ojaci sam taro teku, tuna kavi kimsa. Kui zoanie, kuahatsi pasunita kun se tiktis keemse. Se vestus, kaitse vasa, kuavasa. Se tati, ade haisti kuksanata, jo nahve, luena hatsi kis komose, koet oikesse. Se pitää kete, amumas kavatani, amumas kaikkiaan. Se on heidän tuona, että minä vaan kuja. Ja se tuo kuitsoan se. Santarot pinspari, kuachani hoishi kaata. He se kinishetsa. Haisi koukkimin suaseeni saami. Tuona hanu saami avaniisu. Эти цашами коки мы цаш качаш цати ква ем шун. Mà mình hắn đồ chế bị thai, cái vụ thai, giá trị quá hậu chính như là mà ta xuống, chế hóa sen như thế của chân, hệ giá trị tổ giá, mấy số mà tụi nó giá yếu chứ, cái át ăn bị kia, mấy hóa sen như hậu cầu ra nhỉ, cái hay cầm chết. Santaro de Stos, es menstruatiam. Se tu na ve ma proces delegate kite, kai hati ti hau ni watiam e kunisi. Se kai ka soma yona. Se wa pe ko ma mskur kat. Et ma wa me shweso sutashan. Se ta skania. Sanani shishkas ku pa ni choma yona na cham na haish haisti. Hano kchinei ka yishun tanto ni yishun hachste me na yo shu. Shekan he tsia kami za ti to he ma za. Chemi na pisia ni yo ko pin spari ni ma za ni shu hai tsi wes kai ku. Pa ku she shwe shi ma wa. Ku sku tu ni ma. Wa he tani ze shi. She we ma ko. Constitution ho kawai ki. Domestic. Ook hoor je mis kwijt, dus je met contact klopt. Kan je met wat inspireren? Het is China ook maar. Wat zijn als je het ook weet niet? Door je ze handen naar waar niet kon je ze. Zeg ik ook, je daarmee deze hielp zijn kwijt, waar we kwijt is certificaat zijn. Waar handen naar waar niet kon je ze. Kijk het game. Door het Tibet, door goede wisje, Bijbel, goed en is dit ook niet, ook daar. Zie, ook dat goed toen je mas. Nou, dit is kakoe, je pony. Away, skip where we had what we call common law. See how common law, our culture, bahe, wa hanus tiesi, wa gab. So we were citizens of this country through that common law. Et shena hani tutse. They have a constitution. They have a Declaration of Independence. Because they wanted to get away from the queen and the king in order to live over here. Okay, look away. So okay, and you mentioned something about the colony. The colonization. There were 13 of them. Okay, then we wait to go share to get what you do it at the end. Auction, you try a creature, not putting a honeyman. So, well, my great excited to it, you the queer you, or honey says, extra with them, she get to it, you know, you move, my two shirts. Just as he had put you with you. Take that's good. Though I say to you, we show us so much. What it? I may hold no granny from me. But me, Kaya, we should. Shepo, the honey says, Ecozatic, what do I think you know, where's one? Was I got in every so, you saw any from me, so awesome. That pay mamma is a child, I said. I get to scare what you know. Film Sanana tender. So, enough. Well, Mr. Chummy Beef. You eat that so much, you know, questions. Wow. How you coming? HEW. See here, HEW. Health, Education, and Welfare. Well, here, you know, questions. Well, here, this match talking. Health, health issue, I'm also got to care. Welfare, it's tiny. Education, what do not tiny, no, this must have been one time since. One had some beer, she may treat us, done on this. She got another. Do he must catch up, he must be down. And what's the thing? She got to my to a year got school. Katie don't know yet, so it was that it was a in your special one. Papa chicken and shin to wait. She will wait, says she. Do not make his page when it. It's there. What now, honey, man? Oh, you pay. Just new pay, don't you? So I gave us some way to start here. To landscape it. She no knew that, so height. This body go ahead, you got from how honey, man. Come and know you did this drives. What changes pay hard to get one, so. This is not honey, man. 2,000 you. What pay that woman you eyes. The other shed, I'm not game like for 2 months for it's a cake. Do I? Oh, crazy no, yeah, the bomb.
All right, Mr. Chelsea. So at this point, we'll conclude on the comments and questions here, and it's time to ask you if you can help us out with a little bit of work and get in some comments and thoughts back that we can take to the council. We're going to break out in some breakout sessions, and so here's how we're going to move forward. So that top box is what we've just kind of finished up. This next piece is, it's going to help us define what it means to belong and take that back, your comments back to the council. So what we're going to do is break out into little groups, and we're going to answer each of these questions, and this will help us capture